Yesterday you took a question about Israel as showing, I guess you'd say, how they evolved from Jacob the man to family to tribe to nation and etc. One question I have is, would you say it is now, in a way, the church could call itself Israel, or am I off base?
Well, no, that would not be off base. You see, Israel in the Old Testament is called the church. And in the New Testament, the people of Christ adopted the term church for themselves, which was a term that was in the Old Testament for Israel. The word in the Greek for church is ekklesia. And ekklesia was used in the Greek Old Testament, the Septuagint, to speak of Israel when they gathered. They're called the congregation. The word congregation in the Old Testament is translated in the Greek Septuagint as the ekklesia. So before Jesus ever came, ekklesia was already a term used for Israel in the Old Testament. And the early Christians viewed themselves as the new ekklesia, the church, the new Israel. And therefore we find that all of the apostles, when they wrote their letters, spoke as if the Christians were Israel. For example, Peter said in 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 9 and 10, he says, "For you are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a peculiar people." And he says, you were not a people before, but now you're the people of God. And he's essentially using all these terms that were used of Israel in the Old Testament, and he's now applying that to the church, the people who follow Christ. Paul used the imagery of an olive tree in Romans chapter 11. And the olive tree was previously used in Jeremiah 11:16 as a reference to Israel. Jeremiah had said to Israel, "You are called the green olive tree." And he mentions your branches were broken off, meaning carried off into Babylon. Some of the Jews were carried off into Babylon. But Israel, or Judah, was a green olive tree. Well, Paul takes up that imagery from Jeremiah, and he says, well, Israel is an olive tree, and some of its branches have been broken off. They've been broken off because of unbelief. That is, they are no longer part of Israel. They're no longer part of the olive tree because they have become unbelievers. Remember, it says in Galatians chapter 3, only those who are of faith are the children of Abraham. So children of Abraham must have the faith of Abraham. Jesus said that too in John chapter 8. He said to the Jews, he said, if you were the children of Abraham, you would do the works of Abraham. So children of Abraham in the New Testament is a term that can only be applied to those who are doing the works of or who have the faith of Abraham. And so Galatians 3 tells us only those who are of faith are the children of Abraham. And so we have Paul saying in Romans 9:6, he says, not all are Israel who are of Israel. That is, not all the people who were born of Jewish parentage are really Jews in God's position, in God's sight. Only the faithful are. Or he says in Romans 2:28 and 29, he says, he is not a Jew who's one outwardly, but he is a Jew who's one inwardly. And that is not circumcision which is outward and of the flesh, but that which is of the heart. And so Paul, Peter, and frankly the rest of the New Testament writers take it for granted that Israel is a term that belongs to those who are faithful to God. And those who are followers of Christ are the ones who are faithful to God. So the church, in other words, is Israel. In the picture of the olive tree in Romans chapter 11, again, the olive tree is Israel. And Paul says some branches have been broken off because of their unbelief. So some Jewish people who were part of Israel are no longer part of Israel. They're not part of that tree anymore because they don't believe in Christ. But then Paul said, and you, Gentiles, who have believed in Christ, have been grafted into that tree. Okay, so if a branch is in the tree, what are they? They're part of the tree. They're part of Israel. Gentiles who believe in Christ are part of Israel. Jews who believe in Christ are part of Israel. Jews and Gentiles who don't believe in Christ are not part of Israel. So what is Israel? The Jews and the Gentiles who believe in Christ. We also call those the church.